it up for 1 second so everybody
I
can
was
see it.
so Jan has a little technical assistant with a very good neighbor, Lynn. So thank you, and she helped us with her.
Oh, she's my lifesaver.
I say often, all our girlfriends, we need our friends, right? There are support.
Totally.
There.
Absolutely.
And this is part of what, the ladies who lunches is that, when we used to be able to go out, whether it was being at work together or going to lunch, is that we would help one another. We'd say, I know somebody who can help you do this or to do that. But, our friends, our girlfriends are everything, and they help and support us.
Well, in this case, it is so true. If I didn't have my friend Lynn to help me out, I don't know where I'd be right now. So yes, it's very true.
I love it. I first came, across the concept of Ladies Who Lunch when I wrote a chapter for Savoring Gotham, which is a, sort of an anthology of all the great food and history and so on in New York. But when I was younger, and I used to look at Women's Wear Daily for what the women would wear, and they would go to lunch. So this was almost like the very early sort of social networking, if you will. And so I wrote about that because they were sort of the power brokers of New York. They were putting together all of the culture and the arts, that go on in the cities. And I dare say, across the country, it would be the same. But for landscape design, it's often been referred to as the slowest of the performing arts.
Oh, that's a great quote.
Isn't it? I just love it. And, I'm a garden person too. I was explaining before you came on that, the things I've written, the things I do, they always have plants, as their source or their basis, spirits and liquors, cocktails, it all comes from plants.
Oh,
And so this, first I want to say this beautiful book, this is Jan's latest. She has several books she's going to tell us about in a minute, but this Floratopia. So you inspired this tablescape, and when I think of April, I think of flowers, happy, yellow. I wore my yellow jewelry, my yellow
Oh my goodness, look at that. How sumptuous is that?
Right?
Wow.
So I got the daffodils from a garden client I clipped this morning, yellow tulips, the mini hydrangea, and there's carrots, that are in the vase and so on. So
look at that. See, yellow obviously is the color for the day.
I think so. And I carved out, I'll do this more on a tablescape showing, but you'll get a kick out of this, Jan, that I cut out cabbages and use it as a vase. So it's real sort of nature inspired. So, I started getting some notes last night from some of my garden friends saying, oh my God, you have Jan on, I can't wait. She was my instructor at Columbia. Oh, she's been such an inspiration to me. But for those who don't know Jan, those of us in the garden business, we revere Jan. She's our She-Roe, as I like to say, a hero.
She-Roe.
A She-Roe, right? So first, let me toast Jan. So we're going to taste.
Oh, I would love to.
As we start any good lunch, is a champagne toast. When I commented recently at one of the Ladies Who Lunch conversations, citing the era of Babe Paley and Jackie O and all of these great dames, and so some of our garden friends like Jean Gall and Lynn Torgerson, they said, "What about us? I thought you were going to comment about us." So here's our Ladies Who Lunch. So our guest forks.
Oh, absolutely. I cherish this. Is that the most fun thing ever?
Right. I'm so thrilled that you love it. For those not in the business, I want to read Jan's bio. So it's very short and sweet, but it's so to the point. So Jan began her professional life in Japan, so I can't wait to ask about that, in a landscape architecture office. She had been a principal in a landscape design and build firm, Johnsen Landscapes and Pools. It's based in Westchester, New York now for how many? Many years.
35 years.
That's amazing. You're only 45, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't start adding everything up. Yeah.
I have a friend who says she only does her age in Hobbit years, so it's very, very young, right? So
watch out 1 second. 1 second.
Natural. So you fix that, and I'll continue with our great bio of you. So Jan's natural design approach is evident in the landscapes that she shares in her books. So she has Heaven is a Garden, which is unbelievable. The Spirit of Stone, Floratopia, which is the newest, and Gardentopia, which I reviewed last year. And when I do the write-up on my Garden Glamour blog, we're going to have fun with this. We did something similar for a New York Botanical Garden program, but we're going to do a giveaway of one of her books, an authored signed copy of one of Jan's books. So this newest book, Floratopia, has 110 flower garden ideas for your yard, your patio, your balcony, and it shows flowers. I mean, everyone loves flowers and blooms. We write music to them, we write poetry to them. You know, flowers mark the time of the year. It represents a language of flowers. It's unbelievable. But I'm going to let you talk a little bit about it in a second. But I have to say, just reading it is a couple of things that struck me that I think the viewers are going to love is that you use the first person. So you say, I do this, or I recommend that. And I find that so personal, you know. So how did you...
That's a good point. I never even thought about it, but you're right, I do.
Oh, yeah.
So
right. I think it's almost like you're sitting there and sort of, you know, your favorite garden friend sort of coaching you. So why don't we go back a little bit and first tell folks, how did you come to be a garden designer, landscape designer? A lot of people love gardens, but they're a mystery to them. They don't know. It kind of, I have some clients that even it scares them. How did you get into it?
Well, you know, it's interesting because it's the most unusual way that I came into this profession. I grew up in New York City. I was a kid of the boroughs. I lived in Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan in apartments, no terraces or anything.
Wow.
And yet I was and my parents were both artists, so that I learned all about art, would go to all the museums. But when it came to the plant world, of course, that wasn't part of our consciousness. And I would go up to Westchester County to see some family friends, and there would be these trees. And I remember seeing these white trees blooming everywhere. And I'd say, what is that? And our family friend would say, well, that's a dogwood. And I was just, you know, I was mesmerized. So I think by not growing up with it, I learned to cherish the green world even more than most because it was so exotic to me.
And with the art as the background with your parents, I probably developed an aesthetic with you.
Well, that's it. You know, I knew all about composition and scale, and I went to the High School of Music and Art in New York City, so I knew art. And my guidance counselor said to me, well, you like art and you like plants, so why don't you become a botanical illustrator? And I said to her, well, no, I thought maybe I'd be an architect. And of course, you'd think at that moment we would put together plant architecture, but because we were from the city at that time, nobody knew of it as a profession. So it wasn't even on the radar screen.
So how did you get to Japan and then to Hawaii? Were you?
I went to this very unusual college called Friends World College. It was Quaker, Friends World College. It was very off the reservation. It was a very unusual college. But I knew I did good in school, so that wasn't a problem. I wanted to see the world. And I ended up going to Japan via my college and getting an internship in an architecture office there. We lived in Kyoto. I worked in Osaka. And when I was in the architecture office, on the weekends, I'd visit the Japanese gardens in Kyoto. And that just was an eye-opener for me.
I can understand that. I visited there several times myself, and it's
so
different for Americans, you know, especially those, the rock or moss or what are they called?
Exactly.
Sand gardens. Yeah. But I love the stories behind it. That was the other thing is, so we, you know, I'll cite it maybe in the blog so I don't take up too much time here, but how the stories behind the Japanese gardens is fascinating.
Oh, and everyone has their own personality, and it's totally contrived. However, you know, you think of it as nature, although man's hand was very much involved.
Well, so a lot of people think Central Park also was they just left
perfect example,
and yet it's all man-made.
It's all man-made.
Now, hopefully, woman-made
or woman-made, and so when I would go back to my architecture project, I would be all involved in, like I put the building I was designing in the side of the hill and started to do the walkways and the bridges and the trees. And my architecture boss in the office said to me in Japanese, he said, "You're not an architect." He said, "You're a landscape architect." And he sent me away to a landscape architecture office.
Good.
And I thought I was the biggest failure in the world.
No.
But did the best thing he could do. He got me on the right track. And then
Yes.
he took my idea of putting the building in the hill for another project. So it was great.
There you go.
Win-win.
You had it already. So then you came to Hawaii, or did you come directly back to New York?
Came back to New York, kind of freaked out because I was more Japanese at that point than I was American. I really got into the Japanese culture. And so I said, well, where can I go that's kind of Japanesey, but still in the United States, and I could study landscape architecture, and Hawaii is the place I decided on.
I see. That's
because they have a lot of Japanese culture there.
Very much. One of my dearest junior league girlfriends from New York, she's Hawaiian, and
oh yeah.
Yeah, I just love it. And I worked for many years when I was in communications for Japan-based companies, from Sony to Sharp to Maxell. So that's why we were there with such frequency. So I can understand the seduction of the Japanese, gardens and the allure that they had for you. But then I have to look at so many of your garden designs. Not only does it incorporate that, because I love your woodland gardens and the way you mix the plants and so on. But did you have to learn, Len, all about the plants here?
I came back here and I knew every kind of palm there was, but I didn't even know that acorns came from oak trees. I was starting at zero when I came back here.
You're adorable.
And I studied landscape architecture there in Hawaii, and came here, and I went to work up at a resort hotel called Mohonk Mountain House. Do you know it?
I know it very well. When I was at Brooklyn Botanic Garden in communications, we used to offer our experts there. They used to have pictures. Yes, and
yes.
I always want to go there for a winter holiday. So maybe my husband, my Marty Scorsese here, will take me some year.
Hint, hint.
I love it.
Does that say no? Was that yes? Whichever.
We'll get there. But so you started there with your designs, right?
So the head gardener there, who had won the award for the best resort grounds in the U.S. the year before I came, was a French gardener who had worked in Versailles prior to coming here. And we grew 20,000 flowers from seed.
I saw that in your book, and I was like, oh my God, from seed. Nobody has the patience for this anymore.
I don't think they do that anymore. I mean, I'm there with the dibble, transplanting those seedlings into the flats and all that for months. And of course, because I worked for such a master French gardener, and we did flowers, I learned all about flowers.
I see. It was almost like an apprenticeship in a way.
It was the best apprenticeship. I mean, it was fantastic.
Wow.
So I give Alain all the credit, frankly, because that's where I learned the value of having a teacher, a good teacher, and that's what I said. Well, I'm going to be a good teacher too. That's kind of where I got that.
So how this is interesting, and I love teachers. My husband Bill and I often say that teachers and farmers shouldn't even have to pay taxes. They should be revered like they are in Japan, just like in Japan. But it's often said, I don't know if it's American or just a Western thing, but they say those who can do, those who can't teach. But yet you do both. You do, you execute and you teach. You're, like I said, a beloved teacher at both Columbia and New York Botanic Garden. So do you think you're hands-on?
And it's truly, you're absolutely right. You don't get paid much at all. But for me, it is definitely, I just want to share it. I just want to say, I want to share what I've learned. Why not? And that's how come all these books came about.
That's what I was just going to segue. I was going to say, so now I see it becomes like a light bulb moment, how you got to be an author. I was going to ask you what prompted you to say, I want to write books. I mean, that's pretty enterprising.
Well, it started a little bit more than 10 years ago, around 2010. And I just said, I have to share this. So I'd wake up every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning and get in front of my computer. And my husband would say, what are you doing? I say, I'm writing a book. And he's like, oh no, something else, because I work full time.
Yeah.
So every day was about an hour of writing, and eventually,
And
it
you didn't
turned out.
have
That
a
was called Heaven.
you
That's
didn't
called
have a
Heaven is a Garden.
publisher or anything. You just started.
Nothing. I did the entire book with the photos and the writing, and then I started to go around trying to find a publisher, which was harder than writing the book.
Yes, I know, having written some books myself, but did you, I mean, I feel like I got lucky, even though I've had high drama and losing the first manuscript and having to recreate it.
What?
I know. We'll have to chat. It's a story for another day, but it's like a nightmare, just a nightmare. But we did it, and that's how the Hamptons book came about, and it worked. But
You probably knew people in the city, probably.
we did, and that's again part of the networking thing. When you say to a girlfriend, I love your book. Can you introduce me to someone who would publish it? And they say, oh, Leanne, you know everybody. You don't need that. And I say, well, it always helps, to have someone to, recommend. And so that's how I was introduced to my first and then second editor who, published the first book. The second one was people like my writing, so then they asked me to do it. But how did you, eventually find your publisher?
Well, I first tried to get a literary agent. That didn't go too well because they said you have to have a platform. You have to have a platform. And of course, me doing what I do for a living, I said a platform like a deck.
Cheers.
I really said that. I said a platform.
Yeah, that's cute. You're adorable.
But it was true. And then I realized, a platform, okay. And I had none. So what I did, remember, this was back 2010, 2011. No, that was 2012. I went on Facebook. And I just posted every day about gardens, and in a Facebook page called Serenity in the Garden blog. That's the name of the Facebook page. And I built it up. At that point, was up to 63,000 followers.
Wow.
And now I have 93,000. But that's how I got my first publishing contract.
Wow, that's fantastic. Congratulations. And you just jumped in. I mean, there was like no.
I didn't know what I was doing. I was just saying, here's a great rose. Why don't you try this one? I really didn't know what it
See, a lot of times that's what people say is that if I'd known then what I know now, I might not have done it. But when you just jump in because, you have the talent, that you just share. I mean,
that's, I guess if I wanted to tell everybody something, it's just be persistent. If you wanted, at one point I said, okay, I'm just going to self-publish, forget this. I'm just self-publishing.
Right.
And then I got the phone call that said, okay, we accept you. And it was a wonderful publisher called St. Lynn's Press out of Pittsburgh.
Oh, I know.
That published my first 2 books. Great company.
That's fabulous. I know.
And now I work with W.W. Norton, Countryman Press.
Oh, they've done your last 2 books, is that right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So the other thing I have to say about the Floratopia book that I love is that you suggest they name gardens. And I've done this maybe because I'm a writer also, but I love naming gardens and whatever. How did that come about? Maybe
Isn't that a great thing? Isn't that so great? Well, I found that I did that when I presented my projects to clients. I found that if I named something, they could wrap their head around it. And if I said to them, okay, well, this is the Moonlight Garden, because you both work, you come home, and you want something to enjoy in the evening. And then that would get them excited. So, okay, that's the Moonlight Garden. Or you might say, and here is the Pollinator Garden, which is the one I really push, frankly, Pollinator Garden. And people love the idea of attracting butterflies and bees to their garden.
I love it. I just love it. And I do a similar thing. I name my garden rooms, whether it's the zoo garden or the
zoo garden,
barbecue garden. I did one with plants that all have like zebra grass and turtle head and
what a great catmint.
Yeah, it's catmint, exactly.
So
it's
like
a great idea. It's like a fun thing to do. But
I do one. I do one for colors too. You know, the purple and lime green garden because everybody
that
loves that
I have
combination.
to say is one of my favorite. They call that like a Mediterranean colors, but that's always been one of my longtime favorites. And then uh, I read when we had the I'll just say that there was the Duchess's Garden, and she came and she promoted her book, but the As Anwick Garden. But she talked about Prince Charles and how he loves those color combinations. But I
Oh,
think those have been enduring. It's not just that he liked it, but that purple and yellow is classic, right?
classic. And then when you do that lime green, which tones down the yellow a little bit, it really is fabulous. And your eye can't help but go to it. That's one of the theme gardens I recommend is purple and lime green. Just
So when you do the color combinations for you or for your garden clients, and I think most people have a tendency to like the cool color side, but how do you
yes.
bring in the vibrant side or get people who think maybe they don't like an orange or yellow?
That's a great question. First of all, everybody wants a blue garden. I don't care who you are.
I,
Everybody says, "Oh, I want a blue garden," and they never realize that blue is a recessive color. As you probably know, all this blue is a shy color. It kind of stays in the background, and so to do a blue garden successfully, you have to incorporate, like say, lime green or white or something to brighten it up. Otherwise it just kind of melts,
exactly.
visually.
So you
Visually.
need the two to be able to sort of balance it. But
Exactly.
so the Floratopia book, that's like I said, it's written in that first person, which I just love. I do this, and I recommend that. But for the viewers,
But
just to
not
know,
too much. I do it in the way to share the information. It's not
ab-
like
absolutely.
look
But
at
I
me,
I
I did
love
this.
that. It's like
Yeah.
your garden coach. You're right there, like a little sprite, like sitting on my shoulder. Oh, here's my heart.
Well, especially all these millennials now, they're getting into container gardens. So I did a whole section on just flowers in containers.
That's what I was going to
And
ask. It's pots and planters, right?
yes, pots and planters. And I address very simple things to begin with, which is like, what about drainage in the pot? Because that's always the question,
I
right?
know. Root rot.
And, and so I did one tip on that. They're all separate tips, so it's very easy to kind of read. And I say, you don't need to put the gravel in the base of the pot the way they always told us.
What do you
They've
do?
done well. What they've done studies, and they found that the water does not flow easily from one kind of material into the other. So if you have soil atop gravel, the water tends to stay up in the soil level. Well, isn't that interesting? You would think it would just all drain right down, but it doesn't. So they say you don't necessarily have to do that, but you have to use your potting mix. You can't take soil out of the garden, of course. You have to use the lightweight potting mix. And then if you want to, you just put it straight to the bottom, maybe with some screening that covers the hole at the base of the pot. You need drainage. And you need to raise the pot up with something called pot feet or just like sitting on some bricks or something. You cannot put the pot smack on the ground.
That's
You
a
need
good
the
tip,
water.
Dan. They have these very decorative ones too. I've used with some clients on decks and things that you can make it part of the artful thing. So I'm gonna have my second cocktail
Oh,
here.
good. I'll join you then. Yes.
Okay,
That's part of Ladies Who Lunch, right?
exactly. And this has a little carrot twist to it. You can see the garnish, how pretty.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, and then the carrot juice, and I made simple syrup carrot. This is all an homage to you, Jan, because what
Well,
you do
carrot.
with what you do with the plants and everything is just fantastic. I,
Thank
I
you.
just I love it.
I,
So
I hope it inspires other people to add more flowers in their life, frankly.
how do you address a client who says, I love butterflies, but I don't want bees in my garden?
Well, listen, it's nature. I mean, there are certain plants that attract butterflies, like like flowers. Lantana, easy to grow, fabulous in pots, great in the plant beds, and I tell you, butterflies adore lantana. In fact, so I think I see more butterflies on lantana than I do bees. But you can't say they won't show up. That's silly. And I really would like to tell people the bees don't care about us. They want the flowers. As long, if they have a choice, they go to the flower. They don't go to you. So
I
I
know
tell people
everyone
not to
thinks
worry.
the flowers are just for us, for the eye candy, but when you try to explain it's all about the pollinators, and it's like, what?
Well, I
You know,
know,
it just
frankly, I wrote this book because of the crisis we're having with our pollinators. I mean, you remember growing up, or I certainly do, there would be so many bugs that you'd have to use the windshield wiper to wipe them off the car. That
exactly.
I remember those days. That never happens anymore. Why? Because the insects are disappearing.
I
And
know. I have a very good image I have to share with you and with others, maybe on social media. But it says, I think it was a New York Times article, but it says you'll miss them when they're gone. Like, people have
yeah,
this ooh factor now. It's like, oh, bugs, but it's like it's okay.
yeah, we are really in a very bad way. And honestly, that is what the impetus for writing Floratopia. But of course, you're not going to, people don't respond to that. The bees are disappearing, plant more flowers. So I say, okay, let's plant flowers, live life in full bloom, I say.
Yeah.
And by the way, this helps the natural world greatly.
I love that because I think people feel like it's such a dichotomy. It's like either you're for, native plants and, and don't believe in climate chaos, or you're all for, the flowers and so on. But I think you can have it both ways. I think we can,
Absolutely.
right? We can
Absolutely. I
respect
totally
nature.
agree with you.
Oh, good. I love that. I love it. And I revere your, your knowledge and what you bring, and you're educating so many people already with
Oh, I'm trying.
yeah,
And
with
I
your
and I
classes
have
and
the
books.
and I have the other book that came first, which is called Gardentopia, which is 135 design ideas for creating beautiful outdoor spaces. So the Gardentopia came first, followed by Floratopia.
And I loved it. I mean, thank God I had the opportunity to review it, so I'm going to put that in the follow-up blog
Okay.
post on Garden Glamour, where we're going to have the really fun uh, giveaway for Floratopia, and then
Definitely.
I'll reference
Thanks.
the Gardentopia so that people can go back and see the garden review, because again, this is a very, I think it's a book for both professionals that can learn from you, as the She-Roe master landscape designer, as well as people who, need a garden coach at home, so like they're looking, to you for your expertise.
Thank you so much. I wrote it for everybody. I didn't want it to be intimidating, and I just wanted people to open up and say, "Hey, I could learn from this. This is great." And I,
Exactly.
of course, have all those photos, so many photos, And I try to make the photo. I say this is what I often say. I say the way I read a garden book, honestly, is I look at the photos and I read the captions, and if that catches my eye, I might read the text. I'm being honest. That's how I read the garden books.
I love.
And so I wrote the book that way. I have very meaty captions with lots of information so that if you don't choose to read the text, it's okay.
That's perfect, Jan,
Yeah.
because even when I do some speaking, and you probably know this too, people go to the visual. They want to see the pretty pictures. They want to see what they respond to, right?
Exactly. We live in a visual world now. I mean, honestly, it's all visual, right? It's all
It is.
screens.
It is.
So
We're
you got
in
to
Instagram world, or
exactly Instagram. I mean, like, give me the information. Like when I talk to my son, he says, "Mom, you're taking too long. Just give me the information." So, okay.
that's what we want. Well, in consideration of time, and we're getting there, I can't believe it's gone by so quickly. But I'm going to ask you, so if people, so two quick questions and then a lightning round. So if people who are listening want to become a landscape designer without going through the years and the luck and the
Right.
circumstances and maybe karma that you've had, what would you recommend that they do to become like a career changer, or start new?
I would say, like, go to your local botanic gardens and start taking those classes. I think that is the best way to do it, number one. And if right now with COVID, it's all online, which I think it will stay that way.
Yep.
So you get the information right off the internet. And then when they do open up, I would urge you to go to the Botanic Gardens or Great Gardens visits and just study it. Just look at the plants. Some of these Botanic Gardens with their name tags and everything, you can learn so much that way.
It's
And then there's community colleges which offer some landscape design classes, and just grab it wherever you can. And there's a lot of support groups that share information as well.
Good. That's good advice, Jan. And I'll put a plug in for New York Botanic Garden for their programs. Is that you can do an intensive program in the summer. You can do
Yes, the intensive. It's excellent. Right? It's intense, but it's excellent. Yes.
Right? And you can do it at your leisure also. I did the slow program because I was working in corporate, so I took classes here, classes there, but then you do it at your own.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
So that's how you did it.
Yeah, that's how I did it. So in our lightning round, so this is fun. So I'm going to ask you, do you have a favorite garden design of yours or for your clients that you've looked back on and said, oh, that was just the best?
Well, one technique that I absolutely love doing, I did it this morning actually, is creating dry streams. And a dry stream helps with drainage, but what it is a beautiful fancified drainage channel that you line with rocks. And I have pictures of it in my books, but it's one of my most popular techniques because it's a way to deal with drainage, but also it is a garden feature that's not too expensive to build. You basically dig your channel to look like a sinuous stream. You line it with rocks. You take the soil and you bank it up on one side to plant the plants. And I have it in my backyard. It's just a very effective garden feature addition.
I love that. I'm going to steal that idea. I have a new garden design that I'm working on that's very hilly and the water is running down.
Drains down?
Yeah.
So listen, I know I sound like this is the book where I describe how to do it. The Spirit of Stone.
Oh, I love that book. Okay, I'll look in there.
Look in there.
The Spirit of Stone. See, I know we're running out of time here, but I do want to pay homage not only to that book, but also I love, what is it, genus loci, like a sense of place. Yes. And using stone is the most pronounced way to do that, don't you think?
I totally agree with you. And if the stone is from the site, so much the better, because it kind of resonates with the space right there.
Oh, you're brilliant. Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite landscape designer that you studied or worked with?
Yes, I absolutely adore Roberto Burle Marx. He was a Brazilian designer, kind of modernistic. And the New York Botanic Gardens did a fabulous exhibit. What was it, 2 years ago, perhaps? Yeah. Roberto Burle Marx and Beatrix Ferrand. And you talk about women, she was a pioneer. Beatrix Ferrand, she designed Dumbarton Oaks. And so others.
I love her. And she in her time, but there's a plaque on a building 2 doors down from our apartment building in New York, down in Greenwich Village, where she lived. And I often, so I feel like, it was karma, like we were like right next door. I'm glad you said that. That's good karma too. Do you have a favorite flower? Oh, Jan, I think we lost you. Where'd you go? I think Jan went to get something, so she's going to show us something. But when I was speaking about, Beatrix Farron, that she lived behind us, not obviously when we're alive, but where she lived, there's a plaque there that, notes her. So I'm wondering where Jan went, but that's okay. So we're going to sort of wrap up. If Jan comes back, I'll reintroduce her and we'll finish up that way. She's cheering us, and I'm going to say thank you. This has been a fabulous Ladies Who Lunch Conversations with a master of her craft, Jan Johnsen. please do order her book and look for Garden Glamour shortly, and we will have our promotion and book giveaway. So thank you, Jan. You're the best.